Hello, I'm U.S. News Assistant Managing Editor Simon Owens, and I'm joined today by foreign policy reporter Paul Shinkman. We're discussing Monday's presidential debate, but rather than focusing on the topics the two candidates covered, we'll take a look at what was left out. So what do you think were the gaping holes? There was kind of a small regional map that they covered and everything was kind of blacked out. What kind of was left unspoken in last night's debate?
Well, I think the major subject that was left out entirely is the European financial crisis. I mean, that's incredibly important to America, both in our involvement with Europe, but also in the way that their economy affects our economy. And as far as I understood it from our numbers, they mentioned the word Europe once.
Yeah, only once.
All of last night. That was really surprising to me.
Yeah, and it seems that even in the kind of domestic policy debates, Europe has, other than just throwing out the word Greece, saying we shouldn't become another Greece, hardly any mention of what's been going on there at all, which is kind of ironic since Romney is pitching kind of an austerity approach to economics when we've already seen that played out in Europe. Indeed,
and also the president has been wildly popular in Europe since he was campaigning in 2008. I'm surprised he wouldn't bring that up more often as well.
One thing that I think a lot of people have noticed was missing, or they addressed it partially, but was President Obama's use of drone strikes, which is one of the few things that the left has criticized him of. But when Romney was asked about it, he basically agreed with Obama's approach in using drone strikes.
Well, I believe that we should use any and all means necessary to take out people who pose a threat to us and our friends around the world. And it's widely reported that drones are being used in drone strikes, and I support that entirely.
Does this pretty much effectively take all the criticism off the table for this election on drones?
Well, I think drones have been pretty universally popular among Americans. A recent Pew poll had it in the 60s in terms of U.S. military support of drones abroad, particularly in Pakistan. But I think there is a huge issue here that neither candidate has really been addressing. First off is the way that drone strikes are viewed by people abroad, particularly in countries where drone strikes are being used. I think secondly, there's a large issue here that is more to do with the intelligence community, in that drones take away a lot of the risk that used to be that usually fell on CIA and other intelligence operators. Obama touts the fact that now these drones can do things that would usually put people in harm's way. The counter-argument to that, of course, is that whereas people were put in harm's way, they could also then go and collect intelligence when they went in to either kill or capture somebody, or at least just to have boots on the ground. Without that, with just having drones in the air doing these strikes, you're missing that, and I feel like the intelligence community is going to catch up on that soon.
Well, and also one of the criticisms against drones, right, is it makes us less cautious because we're not putting our own lives at risk. We're much more likely to take more risks that put maybe actual civilians at risk.
Right, and you see these numbers that come up of the ratio of enemy killed to civilians killed. Obviously, particularly with the kinds of wars that we're fighting, it's very hard to make the distinction, but I think other people do.
And even though China did come up briefly last night, most of the debate had circled around Islamic terrorism, but it's certainly become less and less, especially compared to when you think of the debates back in 2004. Do you think this is the last presidential debates that will focus so heavily on Islamic terrorism? And looking ahead to 2016, what do you think a lot of that focus is going to be on?
Well, I think it's going to be entirely what happens in the next couple of years. If the conflict in Syria escalates to the point when Western intervention is absolutely necessary through our military, then that's obviously going to be on our radar first and foremost for a while. If the situation between Iran and Israel escalates and we're drawn into that in some sort of military capacity, then that's going to keep that on first and foremost for a while as well. So I think that's a large part of it in terms of the ratio to which the attention will be given to China.
And do you think it will focus a lot more on China, India, and other Asian countries, especially economically, going into 2016?
Well, I certainly think so. I mean, both candidates were doing a lot of saber rattling last night about what kind of hard line they're going to be taking towards China economically. Of course, this comes 2 days after we just sailed warships through the South China Sea as just sort of a show of force, while China and Japan, their navies are facing up against one another as well. It's certainly going to be a major issue for years to come.
And perhaps, I guess there's a chance that even foreign policy will no longer just be about the military, but more about economic issues than the military, which might be a positive sign.
And it's interesting how those two can bleed together very easily as well.
Okay, well, that's all we have for today. Thanks for joining us at U.S. News and World Report. To learn more, visit us on the web at usnews.com.